Welcome into the Blue White Breakdown here on Penn Live. I'm Max Ralph. That's Johnny McGonigal alongside me. As always, here we're back to our regularly scheduled Thursday programming. Last week we were on Friday with the holidays and everything. But, Johnny, it's a new year. It's a new Penn State team already for 2026. When we talked on Friday, the transfer portal had just opened and Penn State had not yet made any additions via the portal. They'd had some subtractions. They'd retained a few guys from the 25 team that we talked a lot about. But today, we finally have a lot of movement of incoming players and names that we can talk about. We're going to get to a lot of that. We're going to get to a column you just put on PennLive.com today about kind of the approach that Penn State has had in the transfer portal so far and how it mirrors something that is pretty important this weekend, that of maybe the Indiana Hoosiers that are the number one ranked team and potentially national title favorites right now. We're going to get to all those things. Maybe at the end, we'll have some fun and make our picks for the CFP games as well. But Johnny, welcome aboard. How are we feeling today?
Feeling good, man. Feeling good. Got a pod today, and again, like you said, back to regular programming on our front. Now the holidays are behind us. I've got an NFL playoff game I'm covering this weekend. First time doing that. That's gonna be fun at the Link. Eagles 49ers. But before that, we got some college ball to talk about and plenty of portal movement.
Yeah, absolutely, Johnny. I mean, I'm wearing. It's not unusual for me to wear a Cubs hat on the pod. Of course, I think everybody knows how big a Cubs fan I am, but I'm wearing it with a little extra pride today because they just made a big move for Edward Cabrera, starting pitcher, and I'm very excited about it. So I wanted to check that out.
I've got my new Liverpool gear on. Got
Oh,
a
yeah.
huge match today against Arsenal. I'm not expecting Liverpool to win the league like they did last year, but hey, they're top four right now, and would be nice to take 3 from Arsenal at the Emirates. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Johnny, before we get started here, we got a question already in the live chat that I wanna get to from our frequent contributor DFDLA. I'll get it up on the screen here. He actually has 2, and I think we can fold them in together. So the first one is, what are the chances of flipping high school commits like Kevin Brown? And then the second one is Derek Hooger, the type to throw a bag of money at a high school 5-star like Keemon Spell. Derek Hooger, of course, the new Nittany Lions general manager under Matt Campbell, followed him from Iowa State. And Keemon Spell is a name. Kevin Brown and Keemon Spell are both names that we know very well because they were committed to Penn State for a long time. Kevin Brown, Harrisburg kid, Keemon Spell, a Pittsburgh area kid at McKeesport. Johnny, I'll let you run with this one a little bit, but as far as it goes with flipping high school recruits, I would just not really, because it takes a lot to get released from that letter of intent, unless there's a coaching change or something of that sort.
Yeah, well, in terms of 2026 guys, especially because, Keemon Spell is a 2027, so like you
Different
could get
conversation.
him. Yeah, that you have a lot more time to try to work your way back into those conversations. But in terms of 2026 guys, unless your coach is leaving or fired or whatever, it's pretty hard to get out of that. And in Kevin Brown's case, I know that he's a PA native, but obviously his dad, having played at West Virginia, like that's a real big pull for him. And I couldn't see him specifically going back on that. You spent some time with Kevin in the past, though. I mean, if I'm off base there, let me know. But I don't see him in particular, flipping away from West Virginia now that the ink is dry.
No, absolutely. And I mean, Kevin is one thing. Other 26 commits also, like, the contracts are signed too. Like, it's not just the letter of intent. There is money being thrown around. Obviously, Kevin is as good of a player as he is receiving significant money from West Virginia. And you're right on track with the West Virginia thing and his dad having played there, because there was not a good relationship with the previous coaching staffs at West Virginia, with the alumni and his family. That's picked back up now that Rich Rod's back there. Obviously, you can look at everything else that West Virginia has done. Rich Rod is throwing some money around, and they've got boosters that are down for it at West Virginia. So Kevin Brown specifically is definitely not one that, at least in the near future, like this year, you're not flipping. Who knows? Maybe if he decides to enter the transfer portal later on, probably a name that would make sense for Penn State to at least target. In the first place, when he was committed to Penn State for a long time, it had a lot to do with Phil Troutwine and less to do about Penn State and James Franklin. So that's something to keep in mind too. He'd have to build that relationship with Ryan Clanton. the new offensive line coach. But yeah, 2026 commits are a hard topic because they're really not like either they're unsigned or they've signed a letter of intent that doesn't really get released unless a contract of NIL is breached or a coaching change happens. That's why you've pretty much only seen guys from uncommitted places or from Iowa State or JMU, which had a coaching change. Deontay Sheffy was uncommitted. He was previously at Syracuse, but he didn't sign. So there are too many hurdles to expect flipping high school commits like that right now. Hope that answered the question. And then just to spin it further, because it was still talking about high schoolers, Keemon Spell. Look, I definitely think that this staff will not be afraid of throwing money at high school recruits, but I will temper expectations. And look, Keemon Spell is unbelievable. You can turn on the tape and see why he's a 5-star and a top 10 kid in the class. That's probably a guy that they will circle back on, will try to, entice, figure it out. But just because I think this staff is more willing to pay a high school recruit, I don't think that it's just throw a name at a dartboard and see if it hits. Like James Franklin wasn't willing to set the market on high school recruits. That philosophy might have changed, but I still think this staff is going to be extremely deliberate in which guys they target and how they budget things. Johnny, if you, I don't know if you think I'm on the right track there.
No, I agree. I just co-sign everything you said. I mean,
Yeah.
it's and again, moving on from the 26 to the 27 kids. Obviously, you have more time to work your way back into a conversation with Spell and some of the other guys there. But um, I'm intrigued, and I think it just speaks to maybe a larger point that we're going to find more out about, as the months go on past this initial like portal surge.
Mhm.
Is we've seen at Iowa State Matt Campbell and co be a developmental first program, and
Right.
and obviously pick and choose and add some guys from the portal, but primarily high school recruiting and developing. Does that change now that he has more at his fingertips? Like that's something that we don't know, and so that plays into how much money is going to be allocated to high school recruiting, how much money is going to be allocated to the transfer portal in a normal year. This isn't a normal year because he's coming in as late as he is and having to fill in a bunch of depth and starter spots, but in a kind of base level year, I'm just intrigued to see what their approach will be, because that affects how much money you have to throw around to a prospect like Kimon Spell and others.
Yeah, exactly. And the resources are so much different at Penn State than they were at Iowa State. Like that makes a big impact in what this staff will be able to do. But while they might be more focused on the development in the high school recruiting, when I say like I don't think this staff will be afraid to spend money that is available to them, they'll just be judicious about it. Look at what they've done in the transfer portal so far. I mean, sure, Rocco Becht was his starter for 3 years, but he still wasn't cheap. Like he was a quarterback that had suitors elsewhere. LSU was reported. Supposedly 10 teams were in on him. Marcus Neal, all Big 12 safety, wasn't cheap. Tony Rojas wasn't cheap. Darius Dixon wasn't cheap. So, like, yes, it's about development for this staff, but I think we've already seen in the way that they've prioritized certain names on the roster from 2025, certain guys coming over from Iowa State, that there has been at least a slight shift in philosophy from how James Franklin was running things in the past.
Yeah, and just to add on that, talk about a guy, and I know that you and Bob talked about this on Monday, but a guy they didn't keep was Amari Campbell.
Right.
Well, it's like, okay, you brought Tony Rojas back, and that takes resources. You bring in, a few Iowa State linebackers, a couple of which have played a lot of ball for you with the Cyclones, so you feel comfortable there. But it's like, okay, well, Amari Campbell played awesome for you, for this program, not for Matt Campbell, but for this program this past season. But it's like, he feels like he's worth more, so he's going to go to the open market and not take what Penn State seemingly offered him, right? And those are just the decisions that Derek and the rest of his staff and that the GM, the mindset of this team has to be more NFL like, and that's what a lot of programs are doing is focusing on certain positions that are high impact, that are high leverage, that are harder to come by, as opposed to say linebacker. For instance, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Another question in the chat that is semi-related on the linebacker note, at least. from James Sarsfield. What are the chances of picking up Anthony Sacca from Notre Dame? Not too surprised we're getting this question, right? Of course, Pops was a Penn State quarterback. Penn State was in it when he was a high school recruit. They obviously did not finish among the top schools, but I think this one's hard to say because while he is a former top Pennsylvania prospect, Penn State now is pretty loaded at linebacker moving forward. Tony Rojas is, if he has a good year, maybe he's gone to the NFL. And there are a couple of seniors that came from Iowa State, but playing this year, there's not a lot of space. There is some room on the lower end of the depth chart if Sacca is interested in sitting a year and learning. But again, it's a new staff. They don't necessarily have that relationship built up with him already. So I wouldn't be comfortable putting a percentage on that at this point.
Yeah, not comfortable with the percentage. Just something to add. I just pulled it up because I talked to Sacca back in, God, when was this? This was November of 2020, November of 2022, because he was an early riser in the recruiting ranks when he was at St. Joe's Prep, and obviously things were very different in November of 2022 for Penn State. But one constant, Terry Smith, who was teammates with Anthony's dad at Penn State. So there is that relationship there. And obviously having visited and gone to games as much as he did at Penn State, like that just institutional knowledge and feel around campus, like those things are just second nature. But in terms of the need at linebacker, in terms of the fit, in terms of who knows how much money he's going to be commanding, like these are things we don't know. So it's really impossible to put a percentage on it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just a lot of factors at play. Johnny, let's move on. A reminder to everybody, we got a couple of great questions that we just spent about 10 minutes talking about. So love those. Bring them on if you've got them. We will try and get to everything. This is a live edition of the Blue White Breakdown, like every Thursday. Make sure you're here. But Johnny, I want to ask you, look, Penn State's up to 24 transfer commitments coming in, 20 of them from Iowa State. That is not too surprising, a topic we'll get to a little bit later. But 24 in, and I believe the number is 42 out, which, again, Bob and I talked about this on Monday. I think you and I talked about this as well. The ones that are on their way out, there aren't really a whole lot that you say, oh, man, like that sucks. I wish we could have kept him. Ethan Grunkelmeyer, if you're in that camp, Chaz Coleman because of the ceiling, Amari Campbell, of course, but, they've filled that with other linebackers. I think that the roster retention, the pickups right now, I think you get a positive grade. Maybe it's not an A+, maybe it's a B+, maybe it's an A-. But I think it's a very good grade on Matt Campbell and his staff thus far. But what I want to ask you is, of these 24 transfers that have come in so far, what's your favorite pickup or your favorite pickup or two that have really stood out to you so far?
So I'll start with the most obvious one, and it's Rocco Becht. And this is not like an anti-Ethan Grunkelmeyer sentiment at all, because I think Penn State would have absolutely been over the moon to be able to keep both of those guys. Right. But I look at what Penn State has in terms of this schedule coming up in 2026. The non-conference schedule is easy. You miss Ohio State, Oregon, and Indiana on the Big Ten slate. That's very manageable. That's very, very manageable. And the most important position in football, you could argue that like a top tier edge rusher is up there. You could say, especially in college, that a difference making wide receiver is up there, but it's still quarterback. And the fact that you can get a quarterback in for 1 year for your first season against a manageable schedule, that is a 3-year starter already, that has the knowledge and understanding and feel of your offensive coordinator. He knows that playbook like the back of his hand already. And obviously you bring in a bunch of different wide receivers and tight ends and offensive, like the whole, most of the operation is coming over. But Becht is a damn good player. Like I just watching from afar over the last few years, obviously, his numbers and his production was highest in 2024 when he had Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, a couple of NFL wide receivers, to target. But I've just been really impressed with the way he plays. There's a little bit of Trace McSorley to him. I like just
you got to be careful with that.
I know. That's why it's a little bit, but it's just the way he carries himself, the way he moves the pocket, the way he gives his receivers a chance. Like I really like the way that he manages an offense, the way that he plays. And so that wasn't a surprise at all, like whatsoever, that he is following Matt Campbell to Happy Valley. Um, and I understand some people might have preferred, Ethan Grunkemeyer because you've got more than 1 year with him. But in terms of just hitting the ground running, like I think that is just such a easy slot in and just solidified piece that you're able to build around. And if you're able to get that early success in year one, I mean, that can do wonders for you moving forward. So for me, it's Rocco first and foremost. But beyond that, I look at the defense, and you mentioned Marcus Neal at safety, Cooper Ebel. You look at Caleb Bacon. Like, there's a lot of guys on the defensive side of the ball that have played a lot of snaps, for this Iowa State team previously, and now will come in and do the same, for Penn State. And when you lose as many guys as you do, it feels like they've lost more on the defensive side of the ball than they have on the offensive side of the ball, whether that's to the portal or to the NFL draft. To be able to have those pieces come in and play right away and do a job for you, I think is really important.
Yeah. Interesting note that you do bring up Trace McSorley, because now Rocco Becht will be coached by Trace as the assistant
Yes.
quarterback coach alongside Jake Waters. Who knows? Maybe Trace will hear that comparison and they'll chat it up a little bit, because I don't think you're the only one who said it. I think I've seen some other people mention it, but I'm all aboard with you. Rocco Becht is the most interesting one, the most important one. I like the choice. Look, I like Ethan Grunkemeyer. I keep saying it on these podcasts. I think he's going to have a nice career. I think he's got a great future, but Rocco Becht is win now, and that's that's what Penn State needs. It's a model, like you said. If you win in year one, maybe if they make the playoff this year, that does so many things for your recruiting next year. Like, proving that you can do it right away is so important. I like Rocco Becht. I like Marcus Neal. I think that's one that's kind of going a little under the radar. Like, he's well ranked in the portal, but the guy is young. He's played a lot of football, and he's got a lot of talent. I am going to go with a little bit of a cop out answer, but like, I'm just gonna say what they've done in the trenches is what interests me the most. And I mentioned this on Monday's podcast with Bob Flounders, but it's a departure from what we saw in James Franklin's tenure, and they're getting some beef up front. Like, they brought in Keanu Williams at defensive tackle from UCLA, 6'5", 320. They haven't had a guy that big in a while. They brought in Vaea Ikakoula from Iowa State, offensive guard who's 355. They brought in Trevor Burr, who's well over 300, 325. Like, James Franklin's defensive lines and offensive lines were not that big. I mean, Venga Ioane was that big, but he was kind of the outlier over the past few years. They are beefing up. There's more coming on the defensive line as well. That's one of the positions I think we'll highlight shortly, is kind of a what's next, because there is still more work that needs to be done there. But I like that they're going after size, because that's been missing for a long time. I mean, you think back to maybe 2022 with PJ Mustafer. He was like 320, I think 6'4" and 320. And that was the last time they really had a run stopper, a space eater like that. And look, I'm not trying to disparage Zane Durant, who had a great career here at Penn State, but I had this conversation with somebody else. You can't have four Zane Durants as your rotation up front on the defensive line. You can have two. Like, you got to have that true, like, one tech nose to go along with the three tech of Zane Durant to get after the passer and cause some disruption. Penn State had four Zane Durants last year. I mean, Alonzo Ford was a little bigger, but he even slimmed down a little bit this year. Ty Blanding, Zane Durant, Xavier Gilliam, they all kind of fit the same mold. You can't have four of those guys and expect to be able to stop the run with some of the best running teams in the Big Ten. I like the beef. I think it goes both ways on the offensive side of the ball. You got to be athletic at tackle, and they will be. But in the middle at the guard spots, you can be a little bigger, get a little more push. I love it. I think some of the old school blue collar Penn State fans are probably going to love the style there. And I think that's great. There's also one other that I'll just mention quickly, and I think somebody mentioned it in the chat. I'm not seeing it right now, but James Peoples, running back from Ohio State, a bigger name. I mean, he was a top 120, 115 recruit out of high school. And one thing to note about him is that when he signed at Ohio State, he signed with Tony Alford still as the running backs coach before he went to Michigan. And then he got to Ohio State and got kind of passed up by some other guys, Bo Jackson. But even still, he had a almost 5 yard per carry rushing average when he did get the ball. So a guy who is got some chance to got a chance to make some noise at Penn State. Those are the two that I would like to highlight.
Yeah, and just building off of that, because running back is where I was going to go next. It's a really interesting group.
It
Like,
is.
and against the backdrop of we knew what to expect for for the most part going into a Penn State season for the last few years at running back. It was Katron Allen, it was Nick Singleton.
Mhm.
Those two guys from 2022, their true freshman seasons on, they were the guys. They are not here anymore, right? They're both going off to the NFL. And so once that happened, and we saw the early stages of that in the Pinstripe Bowl, once they secured bowl eligibility and both of those players sat out, it was like, okay, well, how is this position, which Penn State has a rich history at running back,
Mhm.
going back, Saquon Barkley, the list, Capoletti, obviously. I'm not going to rattle all the names off, but Penn State always has good running backs, and two of them are out the door. And it's like, well, what are they going to do? Like Carson Hansen coming over from Iowa State, over the last 2 years, one of the more productive backs in the Big 12. That was a no-brainer. But it was
Mhm.
like, okay, well, they've got this group of running backs, this glut of young talent behind Nick and Katron. Well, what are they going to do? Okay, well, you got Quentin Martin. He's staying after the Pinstripe Bowl performance. Corey Smith out the door. Cam Wallace out the door. Jabri Coleman out the door. Tyke Hayes staying. So,
Mhm.
and then you throw in James Peoples into the mix, who, like you said, was a really high pedigree recruit, comes in his true freshman year, and I mean he produced in like a running back 3 role, with 50 carries, averaging 4 yards a pop, and then even more this past season. But as a true freshman, it's like, well, you have Quinshon Judkins and
Mhm.
Travion Henderson. Like, the
Right.
playing time is only going to be so much at that point. So I'm really intrigued to see what he can do, and honestly, just how they, who wins the battles in terms of like snaps, how they're utilized. Is it going to be a 3-headed monster? Is it a 2-headed monster? Who's that guy that's going to be left out if that's the case? Just really intriguing spot.
Yeah, I love like the discussion around the running back room for 2026 is fascinating to me because I also don't think like I don't necessarily think there's going to be like a guy. Like
Yeah.
I don't know that there's going to be the guy. They're all a little bit different. Carson Hansen's a big kid. He's 6'2", 220 at running back. Like that's sizable. He can get in there, mix it up and whatnot. Quentin Martin's big too. I mean, he's well over 6 foot and he's not 220, but we know that he can, do some pass catching. Like maybe he's your third down back. He's used in different ways. And then James Peoples is a little bit smaller, maybe a little bit of the scat back type. And when you mix all those three things together, you have a group that has a lot of talent and a lot of upside. And that's not even mentioning Tyke Hayes, who we haven't really seen it from yet, but has a really high ceiling. And if he takes a leap in the offseason, I mean, look, you're talking about 4 running backs who could all do stuff. And maybe that's not sustainable. Maybe after 1 year in the system, some of these younger guys decide they want to look elsewhere. But for now, it's a really interesting group for next season. And they also may not be done. I mean, they also brought in Deontay Sheffy from State High, who is a talented athlete. He could maybe play some secondary as well on defense. They just got that commitment this week, a state college area kid. Also played at Harrisburg, if that name sounds familiar to some of our local listeners. Um, Good player. That's added in there. There are a lot of scholarships going out to the running back room, and they also have been hosting. There's a name out there, FCS All American LJ Phillips. Like, do they bring him in too? Then you're talking about maybe too many cooks in the kitchen. But either way, running back is one of my favorite positions to watch develop over the next few months because there's just a lot of talent, and I don't know exactly how it's gonna work out because on paper, you say Carson Hansen has the most success in the past, but James Peoples has the highest prospect pedigree, and then Quentin Martin is coming off a 100-yard performance against a Power 4 team in Clemson. Like, there's just a lot that goes into this, and I think no matter what, Penn State's in a very good place at that position. And so, yeah, I think it's very interesting.
It was always going to be interesting once Nick and Katron moved on, because in a vacuum, say say everything went fine this year, James Franklin, everyone's still here, right? And just Nick and Katron are moving on. Well, you've got, like I mentioned, you got Quentin, Corey, Cam, Jabri, and Tyke. Like you still got 5 backs, and it was going to be like, well, who's going to be the guy, or who's going to be the 2 guys? And obviously things didn't go to plan, and you have a lot of movement, and it's still very interesting. You just got different cooks coming in from different kitchens,
Yeah.
now, and maybe one from the FCS kitchen. Who knows?
Yeah. So I'm balling together a lot of questions in the chat that we've got,
Yep.
because I think that, they're just a lot of them are on kind of the same chain. Number one is what positions are left to address, and to fold that in is how many more transfers can be brought in for 2026. I have not sat down and done the exact math, but if you want to do back of the napkin math as we're sitting here on the live pod, they've lost 42 guys via the portal and at least double digit seniors. I want to say 10 to 15 from that were at least contributors. So you're talking about replacing about 55 spots on the roster. They have 24 committed already in the portal. They have 13 committed in high school right now. So that's 37. So you're probably looking at about 15 to 20 more guys coming in. And there's also the aspect of the 105 rule. As far as I remember, I know I did reporting on it when it came out last year. As far as I remember, that doesn't really take effect until everybody who was playing college football is done playing college football. Because, like, who was playing college football when it was enacted is done playing college football, because everybody is grandfathered into this, that if you were on a roster, you deserve a chance to be on a roster. So I believe that they can actually go over 105, at least for the next couple of years. So I'm going with, we're probably going to see 15 to 20 more additions based on the high school and transfer recruiting. And as far as positions, I'm just going to give quick thoughts and turn it to you, Johnny. I still think they need more on the defensive line, especially edge rusher. I'd like to see another wide receiver and maybe another defensive back or two.
Yeah, wide receiver is one for me. You bring in the top 4 pass catchers with wide receiver and tight end, combined from Iowa State. Chase Soul is a player who I, in particular, like watching this past year. I
Yes.
like him a lot, and I think his ceiling is really high. For the year that he'll be in State College, but he's got 1 year of eligibility, right? Or does he have 2?
That sounds
One.
correct to me. I believe it's one. I'll double
It's
check this while you keep talking.
I think it's 1 for him, 2 for Skilton,
Yep.
and then 2 for Bramer.
Yeah, I believe Brahmer is a senior this year.
Yes,
There's a lot of names.
So there's a lot of names. They're all going to be playing at Penn State, and
Joel will
they're
be a
all
redshirt senior this year. So unless there's a medical red shirt, I don't believe he gets a COVID year. I'm pretty sure he has 1 year left.
okay. Regardless, I like him a lot.
Yes.
From what I've seen from Iowa State this past year, I like him a lot.
Mhm.
But I think you would still like, another playmaker or 2 in that room. Again, take as many as you can. Kobe Howard is in the room as well, and you don't want to get it's one of those where you don't want to overstock the room, and then push the young players who decided to come back and stay with
Right.
you, continue to push them down the depth chart. Like there has to be a runway for Kobe Howard to have a real impact in the 2026 season. But still, wide receiver is one of those you cannot get enough talent.
Yeah.
It's one of those positions. So that's what I'm looking forward to seeing.
It'd be nice to get a dude at wide receiver, because I
Yes.
think Chase Stoll's very good. Brett Skildsen led Iowa State in receiving last year. The tight end room can't be discounted with Benjamin Brahmer, Andrew Rappelier, and Gabe Burkle. All those guys can play and will be factors. And I like Kobe Howard, but I still think it'd be great to get a guy that you're like, oh yeah, like he scares defenses a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe he's on the roster, maybe he's not. And that does bring me to a question, which is from Joel Nye. What's the latest on Quincy Porter, a guy who Penn State tried desperately to flip at the end of his high school recruitment, is leaving Ohio State now? I wouldn't be surprised if Penn State circles back, but I don't think that he lands with the Nittany Lions. I think that he's going to command more than, and genuine, I'm talking NIL. I think he's going to command more than Penn State is willing / able to offer right now, just with the way that they've allocated money elsewhere on the roster. And for what it's worth, in my opinion, if they wanted and could pay what Quincy Porter wants, I think it'd be much better spent on an edge rusher.
I would agree with that because that's another position too that
Mm.
that really intrigues me in seeing what that's going to look like because you talk about players lost. Obviously, Denai Dennis Sutton going to the NFL, but Zariah Fisher, heading out to LA. Jalen Harvey going to UNC. Obviously, Chaz Coleman is going to the highest bidder, seemingly. But you know what? Cashing in, right, and landing somewhere else. Edge rusher is a spot that if you were to drop the kind of coin that Quincy Porter is going to be demanding, I'd almost rather do it on a guy who could affect the passer on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, yeah. So the name Anto Saka was an interesting one. Penn State
Yes.
had a lot of interest there from Northwestern. Guy was productive there. I think he was always kind of I don't know what the idiom I'm looking for is, but like a diamond in the rough almost. Like he was a good player, productive player in a Northwestern team that was just very mediocre. And there were times where he was the best player on that defense, but the stats didn't necessarily show it because he's the focus of offensive attacks. Penn State hired Northwestern's defensive line coach for an assistant role, and immediately, and then Saka enters the portal, and you're like, okay, then, like maybe this is a reunion waiting to happen. Well, Saka's off to Texas A&M. That is a fit that I thought would have been great. Like at the price point, like he was going to command money, but it probably wasn't going to be top dollar. It was a fit with the coaching staff. Look, right now you're looking at an edge room of basically just Yvonne Kamaju and Max Granville, who's coming off of a season-ending injury. Like, you need bodies, if nothing else. I think you need a star because as you mentioned earlier in the pod, like, edge rusher is it's definitely the most important position on the defense these days, and it's arguably the most impactful in football. I'm still giving it to quarterback, but there are, like if you ask Michael Parsons, he's the most important player in football, is basically what I'm getting at. And you basically have 2 guys right now, so you need somebody there. You need bodies, if nothing else.
Saka would have been great.
Mhm.
So, like he would have been a perfect fit. But look, there's still time, and obviously
Sure.
there's still spots. There's still spots because, like you said, Max, there's a lot of outgoings and a lot of spots to fill. But edge rusher is, you know, edge rusher and receiver are probably my two, but edge rusher most importantly right now.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'll just say before we move on is that there are a lot of solid additions that are filling out the top of the depth chart starting lineup, but there are a lot of veterans too, like Rocco Beck's done after the year. Believe Benjamin Brahmer's done after the year. I think Chase Soule's done after the year. Tony Rojas could go to the NFL with a good year. Like there are going to be additions of these 15 to 20 that we're expecting to still come that aren't going to wow you, but they need some depth. They need guys who they can develop moving forward. So just keep that in mind if you're a Penn State fan and try not to roll your eyes if they sign like a 3-star freshman or sophomore out of the portal because they still need some depth and some development space here. Let's move on, Johnny, unless you had anything to add on that point.
No, I was just going to transition us from the talk of these guys who might only have 1 year of eligibility.
Yeah.
And, you see it in the NFL all the time where, whether it's a NFL trade deadline move or whatever, where it's like a 1 year rental.
Mhm.
But like, it's okay. You see it in baseball too, where you bring in a starter or a reliever at the deadline and, they're just there for that year and they're there for that push. And, in the college's case, like, they don't have the ability to re-sign an extension
Right.
or anything,
Right.
but they're there to do a job for you, and they're there to do a job well. And a lot of these, or at least a handful of these Iowa State players, are in that bucket, are in that category. But that's okay, and we've seen that be more than okay. In the Big Ten, in Bloomington, Indiana, um, at with the Hoosiers, and with what Kurt Signetti did, and I wrote a column earlier this week, or I guess it dropped this morning. If you're listening to this on Thursday, uh, on the Indiana model, on what Kurt Signetti did when he was hired, and what we were saying about not being surprised that a bunch of Iowa State guys followed Matt Campbell to Happy Valley. Well, because it's happened before, and the most notable and biggest case in college football right now is what happened when Signetti left James Madison.
Yeah.
He brought in 31 guys total, 13 of which came from JMU, the best players from the Dukes. They had 39 guys outgoing, so they had to turn over the roster quickly and just kind of look at what has been the product there, for Indiana. Immediately an 11-win season in 2024, and obviously undefeated in the CFP semifinal. On Friday night, they'll play for the right to go to the national title game, in which they are favored to win the national title right now, which is just crazy, right? That turnaround. But that model is being copied elsewhere, and not surprised, but certainly fascinated to see how it pans out for Matt Campbell and Penn State.
Yeah, it's a little funny and ironic to me that we're bringing up parallels for Penn State to other successful Big Ten teams because I'm certain that a lot of our regular listeners remember a year ago or yeah, I mean a year, 10 months. We'll go 10 months ago. We were talking
No, it
about
was no, it was like a year and 2 days or 3 days, because they
you're
lost in the CFP semifinal
I
on
think it was
January.
January 9th, right? Or was it the
Yeah,
6th? Yeah. Um,
January 9th, and then a couple days later was when all the guys came back.
yeah, so we're looking at like 11 months and 25 days
Yeah.
to today, where we're talking about Penn State is replicating everything Ohio State and Michigan just did to win national titles. How you're retaining all of these top seniors that you've got, and you're supplementing the holes with a couple of key transfers at wide receiver, linebacker with Amari Campbell, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, look, it's not necessarily a guarantee to work, but this formula has proven that it works. And now we're talking about a whole different formula that is proven to work with a Big Ten rival with Indiana. But I'm with you. And the point that I've made on the past podcast with Bob, like, yes, Matt Campbell was bringing a lot of Iowa State guys with him, but also pretty much all of them are guys who were really good at Iowa State and guys who you think can contribute at the Big Ten level. It's not like he's just bringing everyone from his roster over. And so far, they have made a couple of other splashes in the transfer portal. To go back to our edge rushing conversation earlier, they did bring in Alexander McPherson from Colorado, and he's a guy who wasn't super highly touted out of high school, but played as a freshman, and a lot of people in the industry like his upside. They've filled out the defensive tackle room a little bit. I think there's still more to come there, but they've made some splashes outside of Iowa State, and there are more to come. James Peoples, and the point that I just keep hammering home is that the schedule is manageable next year. That is exactly what Indiana had last year. Like, there's a reason they won 11 games and then got smacked in the first round of the playoff. They were a good team. They weren't ready to compete for a national championship, but they were a good team. And then you saw, like, oh, yeah, Kurt Signetti's the real deal. He can do this. And so then now they're all of a sudden the favorites to win a national championship. So I'm glad you wrote that column, Johnny. If you haven't seen it, check it out on PennLive.com because look, the parallel is there. Just like last year, we're not going to guarantee that that's how this goes for Penn State, but the blueprint is there, and I think Matt Campbell is doing a good job of following it so far.
Yeah, you look at the 13 guys that followed Signetti from James Madison to Indiana, guys like D'Angelo Pons, Mikhail Kamara, Elijah Surratt, like guys who were still making plays, and a handful of them had 2 years of eligibility. A handful of them, though, were just one and done guys, in the trenches on the defense last year, but guys who made real differences and guys who plugged holes and filled gaps and produced. And you look at what Matt Campbell is bringing in from Iowa State. Of those 20 guys right now, and again, this number could jump still.
Mhm.
Obviously, we're expecting the overall portal number, the incomings number, to jump, but it could also still jump from Iowa State specifically. But of the 20 guys who have committed to Penn State, 12 of them played at least 300 offensive or defensive snaps for this Iowa State team this
Yeah.
past season. And a lot of them were even way higher. They were full blown starters, 800 snaps, and they played well. They're good
Mhm.
players. You look at Becht, you look at Soul, Carson Hansen, Burkle, Ebel and Bacon at linebacker. Those guys are one and done, 1 year of eligibility, but a good chunk of them, though, have 2 years of eligibility. And so I think there's just a lot to be said about, striking while the iron's hot on an easy or manageable schedule. And again, it's difficult to tell. Like, Penn State plays Washington next year, right? I think they play Washington next year. Like, who
Yeah, I think so.
who knows who their quarterback is going to be with the Damon Williams thing all shaken out and everything. So there's a lot still
Johnny,
to be.
I'm glad you said that because somebody had mentioned the Damon Williams situation in the comments
Got it.
and was asking what's going on there. So a little bit of serendipity, but yeah, I can't
Yeah.
even answer that question. It's an inflection point for college football, right? Because how
Right.
this goes,
Yeah.
is yeah,
It on the broader point, like with what's happening with Damon Williams and what's happening across college football with the transfer portal, with everything, everything that's going on. The one thing you can do as a first year, it's just everything, man, right? It's everything. The one thing you can do as a first year head coach is depend on players who you trust and who has
mhm,
experience and who have experience. And that's what Matt Campbell is doing. That's what Kurt Signetti did. That's what Eric Morris at Oklahoma State, coming over from North Texas. He also got hired there after an 11-win season, bringing with him Drew Mestamaker, Wyatt Young, Caleb Hawkins. If you know ball and have been watching the American this year, you know who I'm talking about. Those guys are really good. But Oklahoma State, after a 1-11 season, is trying to replicate what North Texas did this past year with the same cast of characters. You look at what Iowa State did this year, going 8-4, a little bit of a down year again. Rocco Beck's injury, I think, played into that a little bit. But the year before that, 11 wins, playing for the Big 12 title game, 1 win away from the CFP. In the short term, that's what Penn State is trying to replicate here in 2026. Now, I'm intrigued to see, and I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, we talked about it earlier in the podcast, how the mindset may or may not shift beyond 2026 into 27, 28, 29 with Matt Campbell. Like, is this just a 1 year thing? Or, is he going to go full Signetti and get a new starting quarterback every year? Because that's what Signetti did from Rourke in 2024 to the Heisman winner Fernando Mendoza at 25. And now Josh Hoover from TCU is coming over to start for them next season. I think I lean more towards like this is kind of the quick fix, like the immediate impact, and then you build out, again through more through high school recruiting and developing. But who knows? Like it could go full Signetti, and if you win 10 games or maybe even 11 next year, make the CFP in your first year, and then people see like, oh, I can go from the portal and join Penn State and be an instant impact and play in these big games. It can just start snowballing at that point. So again, we're not sure how far they're going to take this approach and this blueprint, but for right now, for 2026, I think it's a pretty good it's a pretty good way to go about it if you're Matt Campbell, Pat Kraft, and the decision makers at Penn State.
yep, I totally agree. It's what you got to do. You got to embrace the portal in today's day and age. I'm very curious on how much success we see moving forward from teams who are willing to just get us a new quarterback every year. I don't know if I personally believe that's the answer. I think potentially national championships in college football are won more by having a complete roster than by having the right quarterback. Whereas in the NFL, quarterback makes all the difference. We'll see. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. We're only in year 2 of this 12-team playoff with a lot of transfer portal movement, but we'll see where it goes. But that you're right that model is there, and I think Penn State's doing the right thing. Johnny, to send this out, let's do a fun thing. Let's make our picks for the CFP semifinals here, which are going on Friday and Saturday, right? Friday and Saturday.
Thursday and Friday.
There's a
Tonight.
game. Oh well. See,
Portal, man, portal.
my brain is mush. If you haven't figured it out yet, but who you got?
Yeah, so we've got Ole Miss against Miami tonight, and
Mhm.
then it's Indiana, Oregon on Friday night. I've got Miami beating Ole Miss. I just think that defensive front, Ruben Bain, Mesidor is an absolute freak as well. That defense in Miami, I think, will be able to do a better job against Trinidad Chambliss than Georgia was able to do. And Chambliss, in order to beat Georgia, kind of had an out of body, unbelievable
Yeah.
performance. And to do that in back to back games is really difficult. So I've got Miami as long as Carson Beck doesn't go full Carson Beck and throw like 4 interceptions. And then I've got Indiana again. And it's not just the quarterback. Like it's not just bringing in, Mendoza and him going on and winning the Heisman. It's a full, complete roster. That defense plays together. They play nasty. They pressure the hell out of the quarterback. Dante Moore found that out, earlier this regular season. Oregon found that out earlier this regular season. And while in a vacuum, in like a recruiting stars matter kind of vibe, I think some people would take Oregon, and it is tough to beat the same team twice in a season. But I think this Indiana team is just hashtag built different, and I think Indiana is going to beat them and then ultimately win the national title.
I like your picks. I think that's the same way I'm leaning. The Miami defense is fantastic, and I like them. I will say I think that Oregon and Indiana is the one I'm a little more up in the air on. I like Indiana. I think they're a very good team. I think Oregon's a very good team, and I'm not sure that we've even seen Oregon's best yet because they've played a lot of tough games this year. They've had some injuries. I could certainly see Oregon beating Indiana, but I think on paper, I'll go with the Hoosiers. I do think, however, that whichever team wins that game wins the Natty. I'd pick Indiana or Oregon over whoever wins the other game. I like Fernando Mendoza. The guy makes a lot of plays. Like it's just you watch him and you're like, how do you get out of that sack? Or like,
I
how do
know.
you make that throw? He does it every week. Like every time you turn the TV on, he's doing it. It's pretty impressive. But Dante Moore is a dang good QB too.
The
Good
the
good
rec-
teams all around.
the receivers that Mendoza has at his disposal, I mentioned Surratt, but Omar Cooper, obviously Penn State fans, intimately familiar with how close he can go to being out of bounds without being out of bounds and making a ridiculous catch. Um,
Yeah,
Charlie Becker, also really good receiver.
yeah,
And I just think the weapons that Mendoza has at his disposal, but at the same time, just looking big picture at this, right? The second year of the 12-team playoff, we've got Indiana, Oregon, Ole Miss, and Miami. Now I know that Miami in the early 2000s was a juggernaut, but no Ohio State, no Georgia, no Alabama, no Clemson from when they had their really big, like their mini dynastic run there.
right.
Like you don't have no Notre Dame. Like you don't have like you have the you have big names, but not the biggest names in the
Mhm.
sport necessarily. So it just makes for a really fun CFP where it's just not you don't have the Ohio State death machine like it was last year, just kind of just waiting to kill whichever team comes around next. So I know they were the 8 seed last year. It's a little bit different. Anyway, very very excited for these games. Very excited.
I was gonna say I think it's proof that the model, at least as a baseline, is working. Like there might need to be some tweaks here and there, but I do think it's proof that the expansion is at least intriguing and introducing more parity into college football, and that's fun. A point that is very good that I had not considered, or I'd considered, but from Lambda, Oregon's two coordinators are taking other jobs. That could be a thing. Ole Miss is losing some of its offensive coaches after they coached against Georgia, and now they're leaving now to go to LSU. We live in wild times in college football. Those things make a difference. I don't know. It's just unbelievable that a coaching staff is one game away from a national championship and is not coaching the team.
It's
Um,
it's it's truly insane. One thing to add on the coaching edge that Indiana has, the one coach in college football that like has not gotten he's gotten a good amount of publicity, but not nearly enough over the last 2 years is Bryant Haynes, the defensive coordinator for Indiana. Like that guy is an unbelievable play caller from everything I've read and people I've talked to. Like he's going to be a really good head coach one day. And I know Tosh Lupoy is a very good coach. I think he'll do solid things at Cal, especially keeping the quarterback they have there. Will Stein going, to Kentucky, but it's just stunning to me that Haynes, we got out of this coaching carousel without Brian Haynes being a head coach. I think that's going to change soon.
yeah, speaks a lot to the commitment that Indiana has made to those coaches as well. And Indiana's not going away either. We talk about how Penn State is kind of following their first year model. Well, they've also picked up, like you said, Josh Hoover at quarterback, Nick Marsh at wide receiver. Like they are doing some crazy things for next year's portal too. So I think Penn State fans should be glad that Indiana's not on the schedule next year because
They've got that Mark Cuban money, Max. That Mark Cuban
they
money, it's just flowing.
do. They do.
It's
It's
crazy.
pretty wild. All right, Johnny. I think we're 50 minutes into this. We talked about a lot of stuff today. The portal's still going wild. There have been a few more entries for Penn State today. I would not be surprised if there's a pickup today, tomorrow. Like we said, probably 15 to 20 more guys coming, even if not all of them are big splashes. They got to have some more bodies. But Johnny, we got through a lot. Appreciate everybody who tuned in with us here today. It's been a fun one. Had another great audience, a lot of great questions we could answer. Make sure you're tuning in every Thursday at noon. We do this live every week. Make sure you subscribe to the show, subscribe to PennLive.com.